Welcome back to Montana this morning. The time now is 6:44 on this Wednesday morning. You can slowly see the sun coming up over the horizon. This great view from our Stockman Bank weather cam. 48 degrees to get you out the door. Let's go ahead and jump into news. Our top story this Wednesday. The Billings man accused of murdering his own mother this week will appear in court today, charged with felony homicide. 20-year-old Bo Pappen is accused of stabbing 41-year-old Jessica Pappen multiple times in an apartment on the 100 block of Calhoun Lane. Neighbors called police after hearing the victim screaming in pain on Monday afternoon. Court documents state officers arrived to a scene covered in blood. Jessica Pappen was stabbed in the face, neck, and her wrists were slashed. Security footage shows Bo Pappen leaving out of a window. He later returned to the scene and police took him into custody. He was taken to the hospital for hand injuries. When a nurse asked him what happened, he replied, "Didn't you hear? I killed my mom." His arraignment is set for later this morning. In other news, the House is on track to impeach President Trump again today, this time on charges that he incited a mob to storm the Capitol. Last night, it approved a resolution urging Vice President Mike Pence to remove the president from office by invoking the 25th Amendment. Pence rejected the idea in a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, calling it beyond his constitutional authority and not in the nation's best interest. One House Republican planning to vote in favor of impeachment, Wyoming's Liz Cheney. The Congresswoman said the president of the United States summoned his mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Cheney is the third-ranking Republican in the House. And new reports say Senator Mitch McConnell thinks President Donald Trump committed impeachable offenses. The majority leader told associates he is pleased Democrats are working to impeach the president. McConnell thinks an impeachment will help purge the president from the GOP. It also says he wants to see the specific article of impeachment. If it passes the House, the Senate would vote on whether to convict the president, but McConnell has not said if he would do that. Law enforcement agencies are gearing up after the FBI warned of new threats of armed demonstrations at all 50 state capitals in response to President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration. CBS's Deborah Alfarone has the latest on how the military is preparing.
Up to 15,000 armed National Guard members are deploying to Washington, D.C. They're starting to line the streets surrounding the U.S. Capitol. Barricades and a 7-foot non-scalable fence now surround symbolic buildings. It's an unprecedented show of force amid FBI warnings there are credible threats of more violence leading up to President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration.
We have to separate the aspirational from the intentional and determine which of the individuals saying despicable things on the internet are just practicing keyboard bravado or they actually have the intent to do harm.
Lawmakers say they were informed about several new armed threats against the Capitol, Supreme Court, and politicians. In his first statement since last week's deadly riot at the Capitol, Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen warned those planning violence.
We will have no tolerance whatsoever for any attempts to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power on January 20th that our Constitution calls for.
And the threats don't stop here. The FBI warns of possible armed protests at state capitals across the country.
National Guard troops have been activated in several states. Many leaders insist they're taking a zero-tolerance policy.
We welcome peaceful protests, but let me be clear. Law-breaking like we saw last week will not be tolerated here, period.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff have written a memo to all members of the military reminding them their mission is to support and defend the Constitution and confirming that President-elect Joe Biden will be their commander-in-chief on January 20th. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, Washington.
The White House says President Trump has approved an emergency declaration for Washington that lasts through January 24th. It has also ordered federal assistance to supplement D.C.'s response to the threats. And now we go to Helena, where a new bill being discussed in the Montana House would limit the power of a governor during an emergency. It's in response to former Governor Steve Bullock's executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. The bill's supporters say a governor would have the power to act immediately when a disaster arises, but they feel the legislature should be able to act too. The bill would make it easier for lawmakers to call a special session and terminate a disaster declaration or put limits on the governor's orders. Many believe Bullock's pandemic orders went too far.
The authors of Title X of the Montana Code rightly provided the governor extraordinary power to deal with time-sensitive, immediate crises. But they surely did not foresee the governor retaining such extraordinary powers and the legislative branch being sidelined over an extended period, such has been the case for the pandemic we are currently undergoing.
Governor Greg Gianforte's office says it's early in the process, but if the bill reaches his desk, he will review it carefully. State lawmakers will now have a contact tracer solely to keep track of COVID-19 cases in the legislature. The state will pay Lewis and Clark County up to $7,000 to help support the position at the session. The new contact tracer will be dedicated to tracking any cases from state lawmakers or legislative staff. That individual will need to work with agencies all across the state.
Legislators come and go from the community as the session progresses. They don't all just stay here throughout the course of the session, which means that there'll be impacts both here in Lewis and Clark County as well as their home counties.
So far, there have been 2 confirmed COVID-19 cases associated with the 67th session. Another proposed bill would make not wearing a seatbelt a primary offense. That means it would allow law enforcement to pull you over solely because you're not wearing your seatbelt. Under the bill, the fine for not wearing a seatbelt would be $20, and it would not go on your driving record. One opponent told the House Judiciary Committee it's not the job of the government to keep people safe. He said wearing a seatbelt should be a personal choice.
I wear a seatbelt a lot of the time because I choose to, not because I'm forced to, but because I choose to. But I do not wear a seatbelt when I'm driving along a river. If I drive into the river with my wife, we're both belted up, and we go down into the river, and I can't get her out. She's knocked out, or I'm knocked out, and one of us dies. Are you going to be responsible for that?
Similar bills have been rejected at prior Montana legislatures. The committee may vote on the bill later this week. And turning now to the latest on the pandemic. The Montana VA healthcare system is leading the nation in its effort to get the COVID-19 vaccine to rural areas. The plan is to fly the shots to remote locations using a fixed-wing aircraft. The first flight is scheduled for next week when the plane will deliver to Havre. Organizers of the new program say they can't wait to help out veterans at high risk.
The more people that get vaccinated, the sooner they get vaccinated, then we should be at a point down the road when we no longer need to wear masks and can have some semblance of normal resume.
Meanwhile, the country's COVID-19 vaccine campaign is entering a new phase. Administration officials say they are changing how they allocate first doses among states in order to ensure doses are being put to use for the most vulnerable patients. This includes releasing reserved second doses, a major change from the administration's original plans. Government officials say they will also correct errors like sending too much of the vaccine to areas with fewer people who qualify. Well, if you watched the college football championship this week, you saw Alabama beat Ohio State. What you didn't see at home, though, was a special halftime performance. It brought marching bands from all over the country together in a rare performance. And as reporter Chris Conti shows us, it all happened because of COVID-19.
When this school year began, it was painfully clear there'd be a lot of silence as emptiness filled football stadiums from coast to coast. But it wasn't just athletes who were sidelined because of COVID.
It was very difficult for a lot of us to kind of have a last season that looked nothing like any of the seasons before.
As a drum major at the University of Maryland, Garrett Titano was looking forward to finishing out his senior year with his marching band family. The virus, though, kept them quiet.
We didn't play for a single football game. In the Big Ten, no bands were in the stands at any point in time.
If you're sitting there and the marching band's not there, it's kind of quiet.
Lexi Ashton is a junior at Iowa State. As a twirler in her school's marching band, she too had been looking forward to this season.
The marching band focuses on the fact that we're always going to be there for people.
Music was the conduit to bring all of these college students together.
Barry Hauser is with the Intercollegiate Marching Band Association. He saw all those disappointed musicians and decided to write a new song for these kids.
Even through these challenging times of having a pandemic, that we can reimagine things.
Fields run, takes it down the middle.
The idea, bring together marching bands from all over the country to perform during the College National Football Championship game on Monday night. In the end, 1,500 performers from 200 bands in 45 states came together to produce the virtual marching band show. The song, Beyoncé's End of Time. It played during halftime for a crowd of about 15,000 people, then streamed online for the world to see.
It's the first time that anything like this has ever happened.
I hope they see that the marching bands have all put in incredible work this season, that we haven't slacked off a bit.
For all COVID has taken from us, in a way, it gave many of these students a chance to perform on a national stage, something that doesn't always happen in college football.
There are students out there that would never have the opportunity to participate in something like this just because of, the conference that their school is in.
COVID did not silence marching bands. We made it work.
In the end, Alabama beat Ohio State 52-24. But for these marching band students, it's this performance that won the game.
It's something we really enjoy, and that's why we keep doing what we're doing.
I'm Chris Conte.
And wrapping up our news this Wednesday, remember Rosie, the robot made from the Jetsons? Well, now you can get your own version thanks to Samsung. Check it out. The Samsung Bot Handy 6 can clean your house and pour your wine. This one also uses AI technology to recognize and pick up objects of all different shapes and sizes. Samsung also unveiled a new AI technology that can learn your schedule and habits and even send you reminders to help keep you on task. You know what? I don't know if you want to call it a trick or whatnot, but we got a puppy, a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And ever since then, our daughter has picked up all her toys.
Really?
She would leave things laying all around. So, I mean, you could either invest in a puppy that threatens to chew your stuff, your child's stuff, and that'll encourage them to pick up after themselves, or you can get a Rosie. You pick.
Okay, the puppy.
Yeah, but then the puppy makes other messes that we have to clean up.
That's true.
But for some reason, that doesn't seem as bad as toys all over the house. Little trick, little tip. That's what I want to call it, a tip, yes.
That's right. Get a puppy.
Ed, you have some weather that might tip us over today.
That's for sure, yeah. Let's talk about the winds picking up here as we look at 48 degrees to get started. Wind gusts right now at the Billings airport up to 28 miles an hour. That's been happening here through the overnight hours, but we're just getting started here. This will affect travel. It could cause power outages, flying debris around anywhere across the area. Some dust storms. If a wildfire did spark up today, certainly it could spread extremely quickly. And we're talking about a big area as well. Not only the wind, but also blowing snow potential as we start looking into the Beartooths, the Absarokas, the Crazies, also the Bighorns by later on tonight. The accumulations are mainly going to be on the west-facing slopes of the mountains, but otherwise, we're looking at very warm temperatures and extremely strong winds, not just across Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas, but this is also going to continue to develop all the way into the Central Plains as we start looking in towards tomorrow. So here's where the winds are now. We've got the stronger gusts around Livingston, already over 60 miles an hour. You see around Great Falls up towards Cut Bank, also some of those stronger winds. And I mentioned the breeze around Billings. You get to the Eastern Plains, not a big deal. Less than 10 miles an hour for the time being. The temperatures are very warm this morning. Readings are holding up very nicely into the 40s. How about 55 to start the day in Havre? A lot of these readings will be the warmest here during the morning hours out ahead of a cold front that sweeps in. You can see the showers starting to develop. We've got some rough roadways over to western Montana as we get started, but watch the winds as they continue to spread out. Now, I set the clock at 3 o'clock. Winds may be up to 40 miles an hour for sustained winds. Gusts in Billings could be topping 60 miles an hour. And a lot of that wind starts to move off towards Miles City, Glendive, Sydney, down towards Sheridan. It's certainly going to be looking for strong winds around Cody, Livingston. Some of your top winds could be over 80 miles per hour. This is going to be one of the windiest days that we're recording in the month of January here in eastern Montana and across much of the region. Now, the winds will continue to be a big deal tomorrow, especially from Billings towards the east, where that northwesterly wind comes in, and then the cooler air starts to dig in along with it as well. Now, as we go in towards Friday, the winds start to taper off a bit. For eastern Montana today, watch the temperatures into the 50s, maybe even a couple of low 60s. Here comes a cold front sinking across the region, and then once the front starts to pass through, the temperatures will start to slide, but the winds are really going to stick around. It isn't like the winds are just going to end once the front passes by and we get into the evening hours. A lot of these strong winds will continue tonight heading into tomorrow. Here's the extended outlook. Temperatures into the 40s for the highs, and then we'll be looking at readings into the staying into the 40s well beyond that. So I talked right on through the CBS This Morning promo, and I'm sorry about that.
Maybe we can skip it. Oh, we can skip it.
I guess we can skip it for today and just watch the show because it's about 6 seconds away.
Yeah. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.